That summer, I learned to ride a bicycle. The hill behind grandmother's cottage, turning the world into a bright, breathless map. The mornings came with the soft clatter of the kitchen blinds in the light, the kettle sighing on the stove, and the sweet, heavy scent of peaches ripening on the sill. Grandmother stood by the shop-worn table, with her apron tied like a pale ribbon at the waist, chalky with flour from the morning bread she kept warm in a yellow tin. She would press a piece of warm bread into my hand and say in that calm, almost musical voice of hers that every day holds a beginner's breath if you only listen for it. The bicycle waited outside, the old battered frame with one pedal longer than the other, a stubborn tilt that seemed to know I needed a little mercy before I could trust it. The hill behind the cottage rose like a gentle, patient guardian. It wasn't steep, not really, but it was enough to turn courage into something real, into a decision. The road was chalky and pale, the gravel 1,000 tiny mirrors that caught the sun and flashed back 100 questions at once. A swarm of cicadas filled the air, and somewhere the river talked to itself in a long, lazy murmur that sounded like an old friend telling a secret you'd forgotten you knew. Grandmother walked with me to the base of the hill, her step slow and sure, her hand steady on the back of the bicycle seat. The first push, she said, should be from the legs, not the fear, and if I wobbled, I should pretend the wobble was a friend and invite it to come along for a while, then bid it goodbye when it grew tired of the joke. She wore a sun hat that shaded her eyes so the world looked kinder from under its brim, and she wore the scent of soap and lavender and something sweet I could not name, as if she carried a tiny garden in the pocket of her dress. I climbed astride the seat and felt the world tilt. A small, bright storm within me. The bicycle's chains spoke in a soft iron whisper as I pressed the pedals. 1, 2, 1, 2, like counting heartbeats. I hadn't learned to count yet. The hill woke beneath us, a living thing that breathed in time with my fear and my curiosity. The air was warm with noon heat and a hint of rain not yet fallen, and the field on the far side held the colour of some old painting, green and gold, and the faint suggestion of blue horizon that felt almost sacred. I remember the moment of letting go, the moment when grandmother's hand lifted from the back of the seat, and the world loosened its grip, just enough to trust me. My legs moved in time with a stubborn rhythm, pushing the pedals as if I'd been practicing for years, in a quiet, private ring. For a long breath, there was only the sound of the bicycle's chain in its small, steady apology, the rasp of tyres on dusty gravel, and my own breathing, short, then longer, as confidence began to fill my chest like a warm bottle of sap carried from tree to tree. And then I wobbled, not much at first, a small dance where the front wheel tried a different street and the back wheel followed with the apology of a clumsy friend. I felt the world tilt again, a gentle tipping that might have sent me sprawling into the grass if not for grandmother's arms suddenly appearing again. Not catches, but a harbour, a soft letting go of me back to the ground, with a sweetness that tasted of rosewater and rain. She did not scold, she did not sigh, she simply steadied the bicycle, pressed a palm to the small of my back, and whispered with quiet certainty, "You did it once, you will do it again." Trials are only invitations to return to them once more. It was not victory in the sense of triumph over others, it was something older and truer, the moment you recognize your own stubborn courage for the first time, and you learn to welcome its company rather than beg it to stay away. When I rose again, my legs found a new rhythm. The wobble softened, and the hill began to feel not like a test, but a doorway. The wind braided through the hedges, a tinkling sound like distant bells. And the houses along the lane blurred into a friendly backdrop as I rode in a small, steady arc toward the meadow's edge. By the time the hill released its last sigh of warmth, I rode past the old fence where the latch stuck every autumn, and the hawthorn bush shed its red-tinted blossoms. The river opened up past the fields, and in its light I could see our shadows stretching before us, long and thin like strings of a kite. Grandmother stood in the doorway of the cottage, her arms folded, a look on her face I would later learn to name as Proud Mercy. Proud of the rider who stood up after a fall, merciful toward the frightened child who did not yet know how to fly. In the days that followed that summer, I rode to the gate and back, then farther, then around the bend where the road turned toward the trees. It wasn't only about learning to ride. It was about learning how to wait for the right moment to move, how to listen for the land's consent to carry you forward. I learned to breathe through the fear, to hear the rhythm of a small, stubborn body learning something new, and to trust the quiet, invisible ledger of small successes that accumulate like pennies in a jar, until you look up and find you've become someone different from the child who began the day counting every thought. That summer taught me how a simple act, a pedal, a push, a cautious glide can rewrite a morning, reshape a day, and reframe a life. It taught me to measure courage not by loud declarations, but by the patient, undramatic honesty of showing up again after you have fallen, after the street has called your bluff with its heat and dust. It taught me the tenderness of a grandmother's faith, something less loud than love, but more constant. A map drawn in crumb cake and wind, and the scent of lavender in the linen drawer. Now, in the years that follow the long, slow turns of the clock, I carry that hill inside me, like a kept promise. The same road that asked for a rider to begin with fear, now asks only for attention. And I answer with a soft smile and the knowledge that the blessing of that day was never just riding a bicycle. It was learning to trust the work of growing up, how the body can be taught to listen to the heart, how the body can fall and rise and fall again, until the fall no longer hurts so badly, until the rising begins to feel like home. I have learned that memory is a patient teacher too, one who returns again and again with a sweetness that plates over the rough edges of time. When I smell lilacs in June, or when the old bicycle chains clink in my mind, I am pulled back to that hillside and its bright, dusty air. The houses along the road look smaller now, as if the world were folded into a letter I once opened with a sigh and left to dry in the sun. Yet the lesson remains crisp and clear. To begin is to promise to try again. To try again is to promise that you will see yourself differently at the end of the road than at its start. If you ask me what that summer gave me, I would not name a single grand achievement, but rather a way of meeting the day. It gave me the habit of listening for a moment before deciding how to move, of trusting small voices, grandmother's steady breath, the bicycle's patient chain, the river's endless murmur, as guides rather than commands. It gave me the sense that time, even when it asks for patience, is not a thief, but a teacher, sketching a map of a life with thin, careful lines. I am older now, and the hill seems to lie far behind me, a memory I can walk toward in the quiet of evening. When the lamp glow spills across the floor, and the house remembers my name, my knees remember the climb, my hands remember the grip of the seat, and my heart remembers the sound of grandmother's voice saying softly, "You are learning to be brave." And perhaps that is what bravery is, a shout, and more an ongoing choice, to rise after a fall, to try again when the day has grown heavy with heat and fear, to trust the road enough to let it carry you a little further each time. Time passes, yes, and the world changes its face like a river that wears away a stone, but leaves its shape intact. Yet the meaning of that summer, the patient grace of a grandmother, the small victory of not giving up, the quiet courage learned on a hillside, stays with me. A quiet coin I can rub between my fingers and hear a little jingle, reminding me that some truths do not fade, but simply